Okay, so let's get to the 10 greatest Major League Baseball hitters of all time to wrap up the show right here. Let's go 1 through 10. The greatest hitter of all time is Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron, to me, is the real home run king, not Barry Bonds. Because one guy clearly took steroids and had his numbers inflated. Meanwhile, the other guy did not need steroids to break home run records. Barry Bonds cheated, flat out. And Barry Bonds only finished his career, despite cheating and taking steroids, he only finished his career with 7 more home runs than Hank Aaron. So what does that tell you, people? That tells you Hank Aaron's a better pure hitter than Barry Bonds. Now, I get it. Hank Aaron only has 1 MVP award to his name. However, 7 times he finished top 3 in MVP voting, and 13 times he finished top 5 in MVP voting. So you can argue he should have way more MVPs than he had. I think that a little bit of, racial bias may have played into that towards other players, but I'm not going to get into that. That's beside the point. He's the all-time leader in RBIs. When I look at you as a hitter, are you driving in runs? Are you consistently bringing and producing runs to my lineup? I think that has to be taken into account. And Hank Aaron, during his 20-year career, had more walks than strikeouts. Very impressive. He's the greatest baseball player of all time to me, if I were to give someone that title. And so by default, he's the greatest hitter. Babe Ruth is number 2 for me. He gets a lot of flack for the competition that he faced, but what can you say? I don't want to rank a guy. I don't want to debunk the argument for Babe Ruth just because of the era that he played in. Where did you rank in your era? Babe Ruth was by far and away the best player of his era. 12 times he led the majors in home runs. For his career, he has a 342 batting average, which is pretty insane considering the fact that he was known as a power hitter, but he also hit very well for average. I think Babe Ruth is a trailblazer. He deserves to be number 2 on this list. Barry Bonds at number 3. Now, I am taking into account that Barry Bonds did take steroids. Look, taking steroids doesn't guarantee anything because you ultimately have to still put the barrel to the baseball. You still have to have the vision and the timing and the skill to make contact with the ball. So I got to give Barry Bonds a lot of credit. And at the time in which he took steroids, everyone was taking them. So I understand why he took the steroids. And let's be real. When he took the steroids, when everyone else was doing it as well, no one came close to having the statistical dominance that Barry Bonds had. And by the way, before Barry Bonds took steroids, he had over 400 home runs, nearly 2,000 hits, and a 290 batting average. So even before he took steroids, he was a Hall of Famer. I would vote him into the Hall of Fame. At his peak, no one was arguably more dominant than Barry Bonds. He had just such a great eye for the baseball. He's the all-time leader in walks, which speaks for his eye for the ball, in my opinion. So yeah, Barry Bonds for me is at number 3. Ted Williams is at number 4. I wanted to put him higher. I just think the guys above him had peaks that were just as great, if not better. Even if you want to make the argument that Ted Williams' peak was higher or just as higher than those guys, the guys above him did it for much longer than him. But I think that Ted Williams has the argument for the most well-rounded hitter to ever play the game of baseball. He 2 times, not just once, but twice, won the Triple Crown, which means he led the entire majors in home runs, batting average, and RBIs. That's got to count for something. There's a reason that there's a book out there called The Science of Hitting that was inspired by Ted Williams. He's the last player to hit for a batting average of 400. That was over 80 years ago, people. I don't think it's ever going to be done ever again. So Ted Williams, he's at number 4 for me. Albert Pujols is at number 5 for me. And I stand by this very strongly. What has Albert Pujols not accomplished? He's a 3-time league MVP. He's won a batting title. He's won an RBI title. He's been a home run champion. There are several years where he nearly won the Triple Crown. Like, for example, Miguel Cabrera found a way to win a Triple Crown award, which speaks to how great Miguel Cabrera was. But Miguel Cabrera's best statistical season is not better than Albert Pujols' best statistical season. So just unfortunately for Albert Pujols, a year in which he had an unbelievable statistical season, he just didn't quite lead the MLB in a certain category to allow him to get a triple crown. But he's top 3 all-time in RBIs, top 10 all-time in hits. He's top 5 all-time in home runs. And for about a 5-year stretch at his peak, he was the best player in the game of baseball. I know we're talking hitter right here, but you can make the argument he was the best hitter as well. The last decade, he hasn't had the highest batting average, however, so I got to knock him for the fact that he did kind of fade away from a production standpoint over time, but Albert Pujols is the top 5 hitter of all time. I think the numbers speak for itself. I think his performance at his peak speaks for itself. His ability to just hit for average and power and not strike out a ton and draw walks speaks for itself. Yeah, I think Albert Pujols, he's in my top 5. Willie Mays, for me, is at number 6. He's one of only 3 players to have, for their career, a batting average of 300 to go along with 500 homers and 3,000 hits, pardon me. He just naturally had a very incredibly powerful swing. The ball jumped off his bat when he made good contact with it. The problem that I have with Willie Mays is, well, really not even a problem. The real debate I had was Willie Mays' resume good enough to make him a top 5 hitter of all time? And obviously not, because I have Albert Pujols slightly ahead of him. I just think Pujols at his peak was better. And I think that Pujols' longevity stacks up pretty well, if not better than Willie Mays. So that's where I draw the line for Willie Mays. He's right outside my top 5, but he's definitely a top 10 hitter of all time. Ty Cobb is at number 7 for me. He's arguably the greatest contact hitter of all time. Okay? At one point, Ty Cobb was able to win 9 straight batting titles. He won 10 batting titles overall in his career. But not to mention, for all the people that say, oh, Ty Cobb's just a contact hitter, you folks do realize that Ty Cobb is top 10 all time in runs batted in. That's very impressive for a guy that didn't hit a lot of home runs, that didn't have a whole lot of extra base hits. He has 1,900 career RBIs to his name. Now I get it. He only hit 117 home runs during his 24-year career, but based on his ability to consistently drive in runs and consistently hit for average, I think the number 7 spot is definitely more than appropriate. Stan Musial seems to be forgotten. The guy is 4th all-time in hits. He's top 10 all-time in RBIs. He has nearly 500 home runs. He was able to win 3 MVP awards with 4 second-place finishes, by the way. I think Stan Musial is very underrated as a very complete hitter. He has to be on this list for me. Miguel Cabrera gets the number 9 spot for me. This is a guy that at one point was on pace to challenge to be the greatest hitter to ever live. The first 10 to 14 years of Miguel Cabrera's career, his numbers were off the charts. He won 2 league MVPs. He won 4 batting titles. He's led Major League Baseball in home runs before. He consistently was driving in runs. He won a Triple Crown, the first Triple Crown winner in over 50 years when he did it. But the last 6 years and counting for Miguel Cabrera's career, he really has declined a ton. So that really has robbed him of some of the longevity and some of the all-time great numbers that he should have. I think injuries and just his body breaking down overall is to explain for that. But Miggy is one of only 3 players to have, for their career, a batting average of over 300, 500 home runs, and 3,000 hits. That's got to count for something. I think Miguel Cabrera's peak alone warrants discussion for him being a top 10 hitter of all time. He's hit over 500 home runs for his career, over 3,000 hits. I think he deserves to be on this list. Pete Rose gets the last spot for me on this top 10 all-time list. He's got the most hits of all time. He had a 24-year career, was the model of consistency. He never truly had a bad season up until his age 45 season, where he clearly was just, kind of washed up a little bit. He only had a batting average of 219 that year. But outside of that, Pete Rose never had a bad season. The problem with Pete Rose is, while he never truly had a bad season up until his very final season in which he retired, he doesn't have that standalone great all-time season that these other guys have. I just can't look at a single season within Pete Rose's career where I'm like, wow, compared to these other guys. So, again, all-time leader in hits, most hits of all time. He's got to be on this list, but I have him at number 10.